Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
Welcome to Why the Long Face, and this, sadly, is the last episode of Season 2, but the good news is...
There'll be a Season 3.
Yeah, Paul has got hundreds of ideas buzzing in his little brain, and he spurts them out, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. And also, we're having people contact us who are willing to come on and talk to us.
Yeah, well, we're going to have some expert guests. However, today we are talking about exercise for mental health, but mostly about how it can elevate your mood.
As can only one Stella Artois, which is what I've gone back to, my old faithful. Mm. Oh, by the way, we should remind our listeners that this will be coming out on the 20th. And if you're listening to this on the 20th, on the day it's come out, it's Blue Monday.
Yeah, it's statistically the most miserable day of the year.
Yeah, do you think that's bollocks?
Probably.
Yeah, it doesn't
probably some
right.
PR thing, right?
Yeah.
For, I don't know, for antidepressants.
Maybe, yeah, that's what sponsored by Prozac.
Probably a gym company.
Oh, yeah. Now that's a nice connection into the podcast, my friend.
Yes, because we are obviously going to talk about what is the link between exercise and mental health.
And what to do if you're a fatty like me who hates exercising because he's lazy.
Yeah, but it's really a mental health focus, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I used to get some. Actually, you used to do it as well. I've just remembered. We used to get trained by the military in London, didn't we? Before I moved to Kent, by guys called British Military Fitness. Do you remember those geezers?
Yeah.
And I have to report that they beasted you, military term, and made you do many more press-ups and burpees and star jumps than you thought you wanted to, and you did rugby scrums and boxing and shit like that. And I have to say, at the end of it, I did get a rush of something. I know not what.
Yeah, during it, you didn't enjoy it at all.
I hated every minute of it.
And you were crying for your mother.
I cried for my mother. I remember I reached out and tried to hold your hand once to say, please, Paul, save me. But you were a lot fitter than me. You had a different coloured bib. It was humiliating. The fatty.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
I loved that part of it. But I suffered just as much as you did.
The Huffers and the Puffers and the under 14s had one colour bib. And then you superstars had another colour.
Well, I cottoned on in the end that, they got you to run around that tree and back again. The first half of the people that got back, they would go in the hardcore red group.
Test.
So then I would just... After I sussed that out, I realised I should just take my time going around that tree.
Brilliant. Genius.
Straightforward.
You're gaming the system.
I gamed the system.
You're a good lad.
So then I was top of the lower reds. But you were in the blues.
You just have to say that.
I tried the greens once. So that was I got
Greens
into the greens for 1 week.
Yeah.
1 week and 1 week only.
Yeah, I got into the reds for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then I had a curry.
Then they called an ambulance. They blue lighted you.
Air ambulance. Had to be quick.
Right, sure. You turned a horrible colour purple. And then you went through to blue to pale.
Yeah. To all the colours of the bibs, basically. To my natural colour of grey.
Oh, my good.
So, but anyway, I think we did prove that within reason, in my case, it lightened my mood. It was a lovely feeling lying in the grass. And the military people are great. They're great trainers because they shout at you. And I love that. Because I have a pathetic Ponzi office job and I'm telling people what to do sometimes and then being told what to do. But just being shouted at, it was refreshing. It was good.
Yeah.
Really well.
So we could have a really geeky discussion about how difficult it is to prove that exercise is good for your mental health. But actually, I think that might be quite dull.
Okay. You mean it just is evident that it does? Is that what you're saying?
I think there's now enough evidence, when you correct for what they call publication bias.
Don't know what that means?
Okay, so sometimes people just won't bother to publish stuff that shows negative findings because it's not newsworthy. Right, so that means some knowledge that's out there and published is not a true reflection of all the data because people don't always publish.
Can I just say how brilliantly explained that was?
Oh, right.
Yeah, really good. Very,
nice.
Very crystal clear for me. Yeah.
But
it's obvious as well, actually.
Yeah, right, because medical journals, people don't realise this. They want something that's newsworthy.
Eye-catching.
Right, so if you're a high-profile professor and you want to be in a high-profile journal and you can't get in because it's a negative result, it might mean that you don't bother publishing, especially if you've got other results coming online that are positive. that are more exciting findings.
Let's just
You're
take
going to prioritise your time there. But with exercise, there was a meta-analysis in 2016 that accounted for publication bias and showed that the effect of exercise was actually quite dramatic on depression, mainly.
We all know that a bad news story is going to sell more papers than a good news story,
Right.
but I didn't realise that it extended into medical journals like E10.
You then also got the problem that a lot of the studies are quite small numbers, so that's why the meta-analysis is important. We've talked about meta-analysis before, right?
We have.
Where you're clumping together all the results from lots of small studies to make one big study, using clever statistics to try and iron out the differences between the studies.
Yeah.
And you make sure the studies are not too different in their approach and in terms of the participants.
Which I guess is probably what they might call normalising, I guess. I don't know. I'm kind of guessing. But that's
Just
probably
giving you more
normalising.
power to determine whether there's an effect or not.
All right, so let me get to my question. So intuitively, from your mother to your PE teacher to your wife, in my case, who's very, very fit and looks at me with disgust, quite rightly, poor girl. She made a terrible decision all those years ago. Intuitively, exercise is good for you. People talk about going for a walk to clear your mind.
Yeah.
We have expressions like that in our language. Is it just simply you feel better because you're moving your body, and we're animals and we like moving our body? Or is there something neurological going on in our brains when we exercise that, I don't know, I know what an endorphin is, I think, but there seems to be some drugs that are released for exercise for some reason which could lighten the mood. So is there something actually physiologically / neurologically going on when we exercise which explains the elevation of mood?
Definitely, but we need to distinguish between what people call the runner's high, which is that high you get immediately after exercise.
I got it once.
And the therapeutic effect of exercise, repeated exercise over time. For example, in these trials where you're looking at the effect of exercise on depression, where the effect is more long lasting.
Yeah.
And you would hope the lifestyle change is more long lasting as well.
Got it.
But that runner's high might be a little window into how repeated exercise is working as well, because we know that there are increases in all sorts of neurochemicals which are associated with positive mental states and healthier brains. Because I mean, we often think of our brains as being pretty static. You've got a fixed number of brain cells and that's it. We now know that's not true. The brain is way more plastic than we ever thought, and it is plastic throughout the lifespan. It does get less plastic as we get older, but it's still plastic. And we're still making new connections. And what happens during exercise, they reckon, is that we increase the number of neurotrophins in the brain. Neurotrophins, group of chemicals that help to protect brain cells, support brain cells, and even increase the growth of new brain cells and also the projections from brain cells. Okay?
Yeah. Why would that happen in a Darwinistic evolutionary sense? Why would that happen?
I don't know, is the short answer. All I can say is that exercise has probably been a very important part of our evolutionary history.
Yeah. I mean, literally survival of the fittest.
Yeah. Maybe we should look at it the other way around, in that the ancestral man and woman exercised very regularly by necessity every day. And if you look at people who are living a more, I suppose, hunter-gatherer lifestyle in today, they are slimmer, leaner, exercising more, aren't they? Essentially, because they're living a more agrarian lifestyle, and therefore exercise is more necessary.
Yeah.
So you could look at it the other way. The reason we're more depressed and more anxious now as a species is because we're exercising less. It's look at it the other way around. So we're more sedentary. Therefore, that's why when we do exercise more regularly, we start to feel better.
That is an amazing theory. In fact, that's really good. It goes against a little bit your book, which we haven't mentioned for ages, which I do love. I do really like reading it, and I got a credit in the front cover, which was nice. How Sadness Survived, which talks about the evolution of depression and the fact that it probably existed before.
Yeah,
that sort of goes against that theory in a sense.
Well, no, because just because depression is at epidemic levels now doesn't mean that negates the idea that the depression's been there. Right.
I think what you're saying is that depression has a place. In other words, it resets the brain because this is part of your theory, which I'm summarising badly, but it kind of forces you to rest and reset the brain.
Yeah.
And yet now we have an epidemic of it that could be explained by our unnatural sedentariness, because we need to move our bodies and exercise to release those chemicals which protects us.
Partly, yeah.
Partly. I'll be happy.
It could be one of the
factors.
It could be one of the factors. Yeah.
Okay.
So the arguments for depression perhaps having an evolutionary benefit in the past was probably acknowledging the fact that depression might have been a different animal then. It might have been briefer, and we weren't stuck in chronic depression. It knocked on your door, you took time out, and then there was a quicker recovery.
Yeah.
Is the theory.
Yeah.
Whereas now in modern day, we tend to get stuck in conditions that call it a sedentary job if you like, but the chronic stress of having to pay your mortgage, the chronic stress of, I don't know, overcrowding, migration stress, all that sort of thing, all these modern phenomena or unemployment that we've created through organised societies as opposed to freer hunter-gatherer or nomadic societies.
The very first episode we did called Coming Out, episode 1, season 1, we talked about this. And we talked about how well primitive societies might have adapted to a person suffering from depression and allowed them to recover, and they would do quicker because the stressors were taken away. Whereas in modern life,
you know what I'm just thinking of as well? I'm thinking about Bruce Chatwin's Songlines book, which it always affected me because I went to Australia to the Red Centre reading that book, which was all about the nomadic lifestyle of the Australian Aborigines, and he had this theory that the frequency at which you rocked a baby to make them settle and stop crying was the exact same frequency that the baby would rock at if you were walking with the baby, and that was his justification for how movement and was important for mental health. Or actually, it was more of an endorsement of being nomadic because he was addicted to travel. But anyway, going back to exercise then. Yes. So when we exercise, we produce these neurotrophins, but we have an increase in a number of neurotransmitters that are depleted when we're low in mood or anxious, like glutamate, GABA, noradrenaline, serotonin. We've talked about serotonin, the monoamines before, right?
He's not reading these, by
levels.
They're coming off the top of his bloody head.
Levels of these increase
right
with exercise. So you can imagine that cumulatively over time that might be a good thing, but it also might explain part of the runner's high. That's also been linked to a boost in the levels of anandamide, which is one of our endocannabinoids.
Not reading this. He's actually coming out with it. That's a great one.
Phenylethylamine as well, which boosts monoamine transmission. Phenylethylamine increases during exercise. It reduces levels of inflammatory cytokines. These are chemicals that cause inflammation, and reduces the levels of the stress hormone, cortisol. If we've had a really stressful day at work, quite often we'll be having loads of circulating cortisol at the end of the day. Going for a run for 30-45 minutes, you'll see those cortisol levels come down almost instantly. So physiology is important, but it's not the only story. Exercise could be working positively through other means as well.
Such as? Tell me, please.
I think you were going to ask me before, is exercise working just because it's distracting you from negative thoughts?
Yeah, that was one of my things, because that's right, you're doing something and your body's your body's active, and it makes your mind active, and it active in a different way from rumination.
Right. So it's all very well having these studies that show that depression rating scale scores go down when you exercise and so on, but also it's important to ask people, why do you think you feel a bit better? And one of the reasons they give is, I find it a useful distraction from my worries and my thoughts and my negative thinking.
I'm going to go for a walk to clear my head.
There it is.
Yeah.
And I guess it depends what you're looking at when you're walking along. It's going to be some form of distraction. Yeah. But I was thinking team play. When you're actually having to cooperate with others, and so would probably be a better distraction.
Or I'm just off to do a triathlon to clear my head. Yeah.
That's so you all.
Yeah, it is. I could probably swim a width with a float. Right. Is there a good type of exercise to do, or is there a maximum amount you should do, a minimum amount, or if it just gets the blood pumping, is it good?
The results are a little bit contradictory. What most studies where they've actually done an intervention have shown is it doesn't really matter that much whether you weightlift or go running, whether you do yoga or you do HIIT, high intensity. They all seem to help. And the jury's out about whether one is better than the other. And it probably all comes down to, what is the exercise that suits you most? What do you enjoy doing the most? If it's cycling, do cycling. If it's team sports, do team sports. That's got the added benefit of the social interaction, the social support. Probably the answer is you can't make one rule for everybody. I personally can imagine that a higher intensity workout would bring about a more physiological response, but you don't want to do something that you hate or that you perceive to be stressful, because then it becomes a negative. And in fact, some of the studies have shown that it's perceived to be stressful to do a high intensity workout. And there was one study that looked at the effect of MAP, which was meditation and physical exercise. So you did 30 minutes of high focused meditation and then 30 minutes of running. And they found that was highly effective.
So, I sometimes talk about an imaginary person listening to this who's on their sofa. They can't go to work. They've just dragged themselves out of bed and they're watching daytime TV.
It's someone who's very depressed, right?
Exactly right.
Okay,
and they've just found this podcast by accident.
They got no motivation.
Correct. What in terms of physical activity, if they're actually listening to us right now, what as a doctor, and the fact that we're talking about exercise, what would you say to them? Would you say do anything to get yourself off that sofa?
Yeah, I'd say start small. And in fact, that's the advice you give to most people who are not used to doing exercise. Start small.
That's true.
And have lower targets to start with and then build up. The other bit of advice that is borne out in the trials as well is exercise with someone. Have an exercise buddy.
Nice.
That's going to help your motivation.
We've got a mutual friend, Omar. You won't know him, but I went running with him. He was my running buddy. And he kept on talking incessantly.
Okay, so choose a running bunny who's not irritating.
He was so annoying, and I was so exhausted that after 2 hours, with all the only energy I had left, I went, Omar, will you shut the fuck up? And then subsequently collapsed.
But it was very important for you to get that out with your almost dying breath.
So annoying. But love you, man, if you're listening. Love you, adore you. But
the thing is, Omar's good at running, so he'd have loved that.
That's right.
He'd have loved giving you advice as well.
He's giving me advice.
He's good
telling me stuff, and I was dying.
Not good enough to beat me in that triathlon.
Did you beat him?
Yeah, I did.
Your uncle.
But I got him in the cycling though. That's where I got him.
But you're so determined. That's your.
He's a good runner.
That's your winning quality.
I just had better tactics in the cycling, better cadence,
good cadence.
lower gear. I remember Omar's high geared cycling, and it was ridiculous.
No, I remember the event very well. Because I was 250 miles away in a pub.
You learned about it later.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, over a bag of pork scratchings.
So I want to talk about virtuous circles. Is it okay to talk about that now?
If you like to.
Because I was thinking about this in preparation, and it feels like you start. Again, I'm thinking of the person on the sofa who can't go to work and watching TV. And I want to talk to them and give them some sort of optimistic messages about the fact that they definitely will get better one day, and days will improve slowly, but it'll happen.
Right.
It feels like if you exercise, it's been shown that it helps with your thinking and to give you positive thinking and distracts negative thinking.
Yeah.
And that probably has a lowering of your anxiety, and that probably has a lowering of your depression. And it feels to me like a virtuous circle. And your depression gets lower, so your motivation gets higher. So you want to exercise a little bit more. Or you want to socialize a bit more.
Yeah.
And it seems like if you can just get that wheel moving, you can get yourself into a cycle which can get you off that cycle.
So if necessary, you start with the 10-minute walk, and then you build that up to a longer walk, and then you may start to do a jog and so on. And try to choose something that you'll stick at.
The one thing I often
you're
think
more
is
likely to enjoy. Could be yoga as well.
You can almost tell them you can't possibly feel worse than you feel right now. You almost certainly will feel better. Please, just do it.
But I don't want to. I'd rather just say I can't be able to do anything.
This won't make you feel worse, and it will almost certainly make you feel better.
Oh, go on then.
And there we are. And that was the first steps in the recovery of Bob, our imaginary depressed friend.
Okay, so it's about building up slowly, isn't it? But there is almost certainly a virtuous circle,
Well, I was thinking of another virtuous circle, which is you exercise quite hard, you get tired physically, you sleep because you're physically tired. It's a better kind of quality of sleep, I'm imagining.
Yeah.
You get better rested. You wake up so there seems to be maybe more than one virtuous circle, but it all starts with getting your ass.
Well, part of the runner's high you get after exercise, this release of the endocannabinoids is thought to be sedative. So you will sleep. You should sleep better.
And I remember the feeling after the military guys had their way with me on the common, on Clapham Common. I was exhausted. So
by the running as well.
He went there. Unbelievable.
I went there.
He's the Louis C.K.
You were going
of
there, though.
podcasting.
I just finished off. You were going
started
there.
going there.
I finished it off. Oh God,
This
this is terrible. Let's move on.
We've been on news TV tonight, and we're being silly about you finishing me off.
You were silly on news TV as well.
Yes, well, I was. You were very sensible. I thought.
Well, to start with.
Okay. Here's one for you. You're a psychiatrist, right? And the difference between psychiatrists and psychologists are you guys prescribe drugs.
Right.
However, would you consider exercise as a weapon in your arsenal for treating depression? Would you actually prescribe it
Right. So
by itself?
pretty much every patient I've seen, I've encouraged more exercise if that's been lacking. But I have thought it would be nice to have an exercise mentor, someone who tells Bob to get off the sofa, basically, and I can prescribe, because I think that is going to be. I think that would make a crucial difference to how we manage depression going forwards. I mean, I try to take a holistic approach anyway, but I think exercise should be thought of as part of a treatment package for any mental disorder, because there was a big cross-sectional study in the States that showed actually across the board for all mental disorders, exercise helped depressive symptoms.
Right.
Whatever your main diagnosis was, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And improved quality of life. And wouldn't it be great if on the National Health Service you could prescribe someone to go around someone's house, get them out of bed, a physio or an exercise physiologist or just a PT.
My beautiful and very fit wife has just bought a Peloton, and as you probably know about the Peloton, it's a stationary bike.
It's a stationary bike thing.
With a screen on the front, and you get motivation from someone miles away, a very annoying, generally, I find, gym instructor, normally very, very sexy.
On a Wi-Fi connection.
Absolutely. I mean, you can download lessons or you can join a lesson.
So it can be live.
Yeah, and there's a guy or girl live going, let's push it.
I can imagine that being a lot more motivating, and you're joining other dudes doing
The thing that really appeals to me, is there's a leaderboard. Right, so imagine there's 100 people, and maybe you can. I don't know whether you can join a demographic group that's similar to yours, but you can certainly join a group that has similar ability than you, and you can pedal away, change the resistance, and go up the leaderboard. Yeah. And then live, the guy can actually notice and go, "Hey, Paul, you're doing really well on the bike. You're going up to you're now 107 on this in this class of 110."
I mean, is this Peloton reinforced? Can you buy one that is? I mean, is it strong?
It does specify 6 foot of concrete you've got to bolt it to for a larger gentleman.
For a gentleman such as yourself, hungry and thirsty gentleman. Yeah. Right, good.
I've got more.
Go on.
Or are you in the middle of something?
Well, that's fine. Not easy.
I know that any exercise is better than none. Mm-hmm. But is there a sort of minimum amount which you would say would give you a good chance of having mood elevation?
Well, once a week would give you mood elevation, but whether it would treat depression is questionable. Right. And I think most trials would suggest that you go a minimum of 3 times a week, 4 to 6.
Right. And do you think...
Depending on your level of fitness, I mean, it should be tailored to that, I guess, and you build up.
I think what you said is that in some cases of depression, you could almost treat it just with exercise. I know it's dangerous to say that, and obviously we don't... That's not something we're recommending.
Possibly.
Go and see your doctor, but... And that leads me on to my other question.
The jury's out on that. Certainly some studies have shown that there's no difference in response to exercise compared to an antidepressant, which is interesting. For people who are similarly depressed, the exercise worked as well as the antidepressant. But it was a small study. So unfortunately there might be what we call a type 2 error, where they didn't have enough sample size or enough power to show a difference.
I get it. Yeah.
But it's certainly been shown that when you add exercise to an antidepressant, the response is better than antidepressant alone. Yeah, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I was just looking at my notes for a second there about the comparison between exercise and antidepressants, and I found a reference that suggested that the neurological response we're talking about, the neurotrophins and all those chemicals, to exercise is actually stronger than in the response to antidepressant medications. So antidepressants do make a difference in they do increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor and things like that, but there's a bigger increase in response to exercise, which is interesting.
Absolutely incredible, because I think people forget antidepressants, because they're so ubiquitous these days. It's something I always feel. They're quite powerful drugs, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're not just something that you take without thinking about it.
Yes. Yeah.
And to say that exercise, and presumably a reasonable amount of it, can have a great effect is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So antidepressants typically take an amount of time, which can be frustrating for the poor patient to work. Is it similar?
I think so.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, knowing what I know from you, about the mechanisms taking a bit of time to kick in, like the gears getting in.
Yeah, I mean, you may find that you get that runner's high would give you temporary relief, but the more sustained relief between sessions would take longer, I believe. Yes. Yeah.
And another question, I'll be really interested in the answer, because I wouldn't want to guess. We talked about mild depression, persistent depression, treatment-resistant depression, and my personal favourite, dysthymia, which I can now pronounce, which is that rumbling on chronic malady that you can function, but you
don't meet the criteria for a sort of depressive episode, but you grumble along.
But you're not happy.
A bit miserable.
Yeah. Of those that I've mentioned, do you think exercise is particularly good with anyone? Or
we're still learning all the time, but I would refer you probably back to that cross-sectional study that seemed to suggest that across all psychiatric disorders there is a benefit from exercise. Yeah, it's going to reduce the amounts of time that you felt low in the previous month. That was what they found. So I'd be quite surprised if it doesn't help with all those conditions. That those suffering from depressive disorder have been shown to benefit more from physical exercise than other psychiatric groups or other psychiatric conditions. Within major depressive disorder, you might say that dysthymia and TRD would fit into that bracket as well. But this might just be because more studies have been done on that condition than anything else, so you've got more. Again, it's down to power to find a difference.
I do like the way that you apply balance to all the evidence that you present. Very scientific.
Try to be.
If I may say so. It comes across.
Try to be.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. Nice one. I like that, because it's science, not just opinion, and you have opinions as well. I like that. Very good. So another quick question, and do you think that there's something which says, and I think I know the answer actually, in terms of prevention, prophylaxis, or just doing it as a lifestyle choice to prevent you, or to make yourself less susceptible. We talked about susceptibility before. Just to do it for that. I mean, we do it to keep your heart healthy. Why not do it to keep your mind healthy? It makes absolute 100% sense. Why the hell I don't do it? Oh, I know. I'm lazy.
There was one study that I found, which was the results of a cohort study. That's when you've got a big group of people and you follow them over a long period of time.
I remember.
You start off when they're quite young.
Yeah.
So this is the Hunt cohort study in Norway. It's one of the biggest. I think it might be the biggest ever, because it's 33,908 people who are now adults, obviously. And they were healthy to begin with, and then they followed them up. And they were able to look at what effect regular exercise, physical exercise, had on their risk of getting depression and anxiety later in life, because they'd followed them up. And they found that after adjusting for confounds, about 12% of future cases of depression could have been prevented if all participants had engaged in at least 1 hour physical activity each week.
Say that again so they properly understand it.
Inevitably, a proportion of all adults are going to get depressed, but they determined that about 12% of those cases could have been prevented if they'd done regular exercise. 1 hour a week, at least.
1 hour, one hour a week, which is not that much. That is an incredible claim, but it's backed up by the fact that it's longitudinal. I think that's the right word.
So,
and a big sample, right?
It's a big sample. And they looked at whether intensity was important, and they found that any intensity provided protection. So it's interesting. It's not as powerful as a randomized controlled trial, but it's still pretty interesting.
No, I love it. I love it. That sounds significant to me. Question. We've been talking about anxiety and depression because we've been talking about the way that a decent amount of exercise, well controlled, raises mood. What about the other psychiatric disorders, the more psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, etc., paranoid schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
We talked about their sort of hierarchy before, how anxiety, depression, more psychotic illnesses.
Right.
Is this the case that maybe it can tackle the psychotic illness at source, or is it one of those things that if depression is relieved in whatever way, including exercise, then maybe the things higher up the pyramid will be relieved?
It would be more the case that it's things lower along the pyramid. So if you can treat depression, you're likely to treat the comorbid anxiety as well.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any evidence that exercise improves psychosis.
Right.
At this stage. There is some evidence as well about which people might do less well with exercise for depression.
Nice.
I was looking people with higher baseline depressive symptom scores. So that all stands to reason. The more severely depressed you are, the more difficult it is for you to motivate yourself to do.
Yeah, it's similar to the question I asked about where you would treat it, mild, resistant, and you're saying at the mild end.
You should. I think you should use it for all depression. It's just for the more severely depressed. I think it's going to be more important for someone to do that exercise intervention with you. Right?
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. So you're saying that exercise could be effective in any kind of depressive disorder, but the way you administer it might have to be self-starting. Might be harder.
It's bound to be harder. Of course, it is. It stands to reason. And if you're misusing alcohol, then that's going to be an obvious barrier to it as well. And apparently, people who smoke heavily and people who don't have flexibility in their work schedule to build in the exercise routine.
I love this idea that you came up with earlier about modern life. Modern life is rubbish, according to an album by Blur, but modern life not only being stressful, but also putting in patterns of lifestyle that disallows you from doing things that are going to make you feel better, almost like a vicious circle.
But on the positive note, the dropout rate was only 18% in the randomized controlled trials.
Dropout rate?
So the people with depression who were going through the trial for exercise as a treatment, only about 18% didn't finish the trial. That sounds
okay.
That's quite low. That's pretty good.
Did different types of depression, mild, or was it more?
Well, I don't know actually whether the more severely depressed dropped out.
Right.
Preferentially. It's possible. But you can't assume that. It could be that the more depressed are going to see that much bigger improvement. We don't know.
Very good point. Because if you that's right. So that relatively, if you're in an absolute hell and you come from hell to just mild depression, that's a hell of a win.
Right.
Question then. Everyone who does sport, professional sportsmen, they must never get depressed then.
Well, obviously that's not true.
Oh, that would be a shame.
Yeah.
No, I didn't think it was. Very much tongue-in-cheek question.
It's helpful, but obviously it's not. As we know from that cohort study, exercise was going to prevent depression in a proportion, but not in everybody. And you have to take a look at each case because sports people often are operating, particularly men, in quite macho environments where they actually don't get any emotional support. And they're in a high pressure environment to succeed. You could argue they're at higher risk even though they're doing the exercise.
Well,
so
exactly.
There's a lot of confounds there.
And they've got the other thing, of course, which is the rock and roll star who gets massive adulation and then the adulation stops. And of course, if you're a sports star, you get to 30, 35, 40, unless you play darts, in which case you get to sort of 70, whatever it is. That adulation
you got
stops
to do
as
you
well.
got to do a Lineker, haven't you?
You got to
go into.
God, that guy's talented.
You got to go into commentary.
The other thing, actually, but cricketers have a higher preponderance for depression.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly fit these days, particularly fast
not like
bowlers,
the
but
old days. Either.
Yeah, that's right.
Lamb and Botham.
I think Botham was pretty fit, but Alan Lamb not so much.
Botham liked a beer, man, didn't he?
And
famously.
as well, yeah. David Boone famously had 100 beers on the flight from Australia to London. He still holds the record, and that's the record of the most pissed up Australians. So that is some record. But
some of these England, when the English players, when they're fielding, was just embarrassing.
Mike Gatting was a bit of a
Gatting.
corker.
It's waddling along.
Yeah, no, I agree.
As it crashed to the boundary.
Yeah, Phil Tufnell, I don't think exactly.
Tuffers.
Anyway, my point being is it's irrelevant of how fit you are. If you're away from your family, you're under pressure in a 5-day test match for
Good point.
that many hours. Being a batsman, being a top order batsman, and you're
pressure.
off form, incredible pressure. Every delivery is pressure, and so there's a lot more to it in professional
and you
sport.
get your teammates going, mate, you all right? No, not really.
Yeah,
most of the time.
But there have been a few instances of people suffering depression, and
Just Scothick was famously wrote a book about it.
Yeah, and good for him. But Jeff Boycott was famously quoted against one batsman who was sent home because he was suffering depression.
Right.
And Jeff Boycott, not the most reconstructed,
not the most touchy feeling.
No, because he said depressed. The lad's depressed. Of course he's depressed with that batting average.
I know.
Oh dear, Jeff, come on, mate.
You're not getting it.
Really?
All right, he did get it. He didn't care. Made a good gag out of it.
I think he didn't get it. I think he didn't understand. I think he was like looking at the stats and going, "Yeah, it's a depressing bloody average, is that, lad?"
I mean, cricket is more colourful for having Jeff Boycott, but he's a bit of a knob sometimes.
He is, and
he may be on the spectrum.
I truly think he's which made him such a great opener.
He sometimes just doesn't get it, does he?
No, well, he's a belligerent, focused, belligerent Yorkshireman.
Brilliant.
And as a Yorkshireman, I can say that.
Yeah.
And he could keep out Jeff Thompson because...
he would just grind it out.
15 before lunch.
I think it might be time for one of your beautiful somethings.
Go on then. I think this has been... I've learned tons from you, Doctor, as I always do. But I think we've learned several things. I think we've learned that as you would intuit, there is a lot to be said for doing exercise to help mood disorders, especially anxiety and depression. There's evidence definitely that is true, and it treats all kinds of depression, but it takes maybe a little bit longer with the more severe types of depression.
Possibly, yeah. We're not sure about that.
The type of exercise doesn't really matter, just do something. But there is a nice happy medium of maybe an hour, 2 or 3 times a week, which is kind of optimal.
At least 3 times a week. And I think for most people, doing more than just walking. Try and do some aerobic exercise.
So aerobic meaning?
Well, just something that gets up your breathing rate and your heart rate.
Yeah, that's what even I knew what that was.
But you could combine that with yoga, and that's been shown to be helpful too. The more vigorous exercises, you're going to get all the benefits of those extra neurotrophins and neurotransmitters being released.
Yeah, I think it hardly matters what you do, and if you're depressed on the sofa, you will not feel worse having done exercise, and you'll almost certainly feel better. Please get off that sofa.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Well, I guess all it remains is that we wish everybody a Blue Monday. It's not as bad as all that.
A happy Blue Monday.
A happy Blue Monday.
Have a happy Blue Monday.
And the day's getting longer, guys.
Go out for a walk.
Yeah, go out for a walk.
Or jog. Or go and play some footy.
Oh, lovely.
Or just a jog around the park. Or go to the gym.
And do it with someone.
As usual, get in touch to tell us your experiences. Maybe exercise has been something you've used to keep your anxiety or depression at bay. I know one guy who runs to work every morning because he's found that it's been good at reducing his anxiety and helping him sleep.
What, is he a farmer?
No.
Ah.
No, works in London.
Yeah, good for him. What are we've got Meads, we've got social Meads, isn't it?
Yeah, go to Facebook, we're on there, and rate us on wherever you get the podcast, and we'll see you next time. We'll see you in season 3.
Yeah.
We'll be taking a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
But we'll come back with a new and pretty much the same product, but with some guests.
Yeah, with some guests to make it much, much. Yeah. Well, thank you for sticking with us on season 2. We've loved it, man. It's been great fun.
Yeah.
And we'll see you on the next one.
All right. Bye.